Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to another instalment of the CarpFix Live. The main purpose of these podcast type feeds is to do an interactive Q&A with you guys. So get your questions in, anything carp fishing related, anything about our content, anything you'd like to ask either of us, and we will do our best to answer all of your questions. But whilst those come in, I'll do a little bit of waffle, as I usually do, to tell you what we've been up to and maybe what we're going to be up to in the next few weeks. So I've just returned from 2 weeks at Gigantica, back-to-back weeks, which is in itself, I think, is a bit of an edge. You know, if you spend a week on the lake, then you obviously build a bit of a feeling for what's going on, and hopefully that can get you a little bit better set for the second week. But the first week was filmed for CarpFix. We got 2 films out of it, and in part 1 I managed to catch a fish called the patch fully, which is one of the ones that I've stared at on the wall for many a year. A really nice, like heavily, not a complete fully, but yeah, it's called the patch fully because it's got a couple of bold spots on it. But a 53 pounder, a mega fish. I caught that from a swim called Big Southerly. Now, Big Southerly is a swim that I've not fished before. It's not one of the main central favoured pegs that I'd normally really fancy. But on arrival, there was loads of fish in the swim. It seemed like the best place to go, and I caught that fish on the first evening and then blanked the following 3 nights. Now, normally, the main central pegs, Coes, Alcatraz and Alamo, are always my favourite ones. I think when you're fishing towards the middle of the lake, you're never far wrong. You know, if the fish are in one end of the lake, they're still sort of always fishing the middle. So the corners are more hit and miss, and Big Southerly is a bit of a corner area, and the central pegs they're more consistent. And as luck would have it, after 3 nights of blanking in well, not blanking, but 3 nights of no activity after the patch fully, the Alcatraz swim was free. Now, originally it had been taken by one of the CarpFix members, and then he'd moved out of there and gone into a swim called Oblivion. And it sat empty for a couple of days. Ben the bailiff was threatening to go in there, but he didn't. And then basically I ended up in there after 3 nights in Big Southerly. Got in there, and then all hell broke loose. They just implemented a new rule where the bailiffs can go out and bait for you. And I found 2 clear spots. One was at 30 wraps, one was at 33 wraps. Now, relatively small. Like, not, you could have squeezed 2 rods on each of them, but probably not when you've got a recast in the dark and try and hit it. You know, it's much easier to aim for the centre of the spot, and if it goes a little bit left, a little bit right, much easier to fish these spots with 1 rod each. So that's what I did. Baited them really heavy. Well, the bailiff did for me via the boat. A whole 17 litre quarter bucket brims. You know, 5 kilos of hemp, 5 kilos of hemp, 2.5 kilos of maize, 2.5 kilos of pellet, 3 or 4 kilos of isofish boilies. Like I say, a level filled 17 litre bucket on each spot, and all hell broke loose from the get-go. As soon as I got on those spots, as soon as I put that bait in the water, I think I landed 23 in 4 nights, and I lost a few as well. So really good going, real good action. Loads of bites while we're having dinner up at the lodge. That was quite amusing, like having to bolt off mid-dinner. But yeah, all the members caught, everyone on the trip caught fish. Real good time had by all, and 2 great films. I'm sure that you're going to really enjoy them. One of our members, Ben, caught a 60 pounder from Alamo. That was like a real standout. And yeah, just a really good social session at one of carp fishing's greatest holiday venues. So yeah, really good time had there. What you been up to, Scott? What you been doing?
Blowing away. Why has it gone weird on here? Look.
What's happened?
Look at the frame.
Have you squished me?
I don't know. It wasn't like that before. It's weird, isn't it?
Looks alright.
Wait, it doesn't look. It's gone all weird. I don't know why it's.
Shall I carry on talking for a bit while you try and?
I don't really know what to suggest to do. We just look a lot thinner.
Have you squished us?
I don't know what's happened. Yeah, just carry on talking for a second.
Okay.
I might flick between things.
Okay. Well, coming up, I'm off to Grenville's on Monday with Scott. Not been there since May, just before it closed. So looking forward to sort of reintroducing myself to Grenville, because it's been a little while. So I've got that this week coming.
Someone just said to me on here, actually, sorry to interrupt. They said, where is it? It's one of the members on Grenville, I think. Where is he?
Where did he say?
He said, where is it? He said something about, hope you didn't get too wet in swim 3. I forget where it is. Where's it gone? Swim 3 is obviously the swim that I ended up. Mark. Hello, fellas. Hope you didn't get too wet in Peg 3, Scott. So I moved into Peg 3. This is the start of this week, as I've already explained to you. And the session was just horrendous from start to finish because of the weed, because of the wind and the rain. On that last day, I didn't peg my bivvy down properly, stupidly, and I could see this rain coming over, like, from a distance. So I was like, right, that rain's coming. I'll get the front on my bivvy. Didn't peg it down. That's where the problem was. Like, the back of it was pegged down, but it didn't make a difference when this wind came over. And then literally it started, just the wind has picked up and up, white tips. I was like, Paul, there's bloody white tips on the lake. Like, he was back at the bait thing. And then all of a sudden, my bivvy's just like taking off. It's like it's leaning back like that, so I'm all exposed. And then it's just sat up against the back of the swim, like against the wooden board things. I was like,
was it raining?
No. Well, it wasn't at that point.
Right.
So then I got out. I had all my camera, my laptop, everything was out. So I had no time to try and find a peg because the wind was so bad. So I just got
strong, fast.
I literally went down. I've just held it down to keep everything dry, and in the process, the heavens opened, and the back of me, the front of me was bone dry. Back of me was like soaking wet all the way through.
Oh no!
And then that was like on the Wednesday, and at about 11:30, 12, and I was like, I'm going home.
Well, this is in the morning it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like all the rods got wiped out because of the wind. Like the weed all came over. So I'm going home because
like Cambridge is really, really flat, isn't it? Really flat area of the UK, and it's particularly exposed in that around that lake.
Yeah, just don't know why. Just like a funnel almost.
Yeah, like you can look at the weather and see 10-mile-an-hour winds, which
it did it did forecast like 40-mile-an-hour gusts, right. And that was what it was like, but it was for like an hour and then it's gone.
Yeah. If you're on a small sheltered lake, it doesn't really matter, but a big open pit like that, especially in Cambridge, you're asking for it, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, he puts windbreakers round on the swims for a reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, my recent session wasn't a success. I filmed parts of it for, just as the story element. Well, not every session goes well.
Blanks happen, don't they?
Yeah, but fishing time-wise on that session wasn't particularly long. Like the first day, I didn't really even fish properly just because of, the weed that was causing the problem. And then I moved the next day, didn't get set up until like mid-afternoon. Got the rods out nice, looked promising for a bite, was seeing fish showing long. Thought I might get something. And then the next morning, that's when all that rain came. So I didn't really fish that long.
No.
I didn't really give it a chance in a swim, so yeah, we'll go back Monday and you can go in a swim you want to go. I'll just go next to you wherever it is. Yeah, it's just nice to get the rods out.
It'd be nice to see it again. Obviously, I haven't been there since May, but it's coming to that time of year. Good. I think it's good autumn water. It's got that sort of gives me that vibe when I've been there.
Yeah.
But after that trip, but with you, we're both going to. Going to Holland to fish Carp. So for a quarter thinking tackle. I don't think I've ever filmed with Tom Dove before, apart from Monster Carp. I don't think I've ever done a masterclass with thinking tackle with him. But I'm going fishing with Tom on Carp. Scotty's filming, so that'll be interesting. There's loads of big ones in there, so I've got that to look forward to.
It's a very odd lake.
Yeah. You been there?
Yeah, I did the underwater there.
Okay.
With Dan Dovey Spooner.
Yeah.
Very strange lake because you've got the four. It's basically
4 swims in the corners.
It's like a square, swims in the corner, 4 double swims, and then you got that flotation air, whatever it thing, that massive thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Weird lake because it's just a bowl.
Yeah. All the pictures I've seen of it, the fish are always on the top out by that.
We took the drone out there, and there's just monsters just going around. We put the GoPro. Levy's put the GoPro on the like the rope going down, and they were just monsters there.
Yeah.
You can use zigs though, can't you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll obviously, having seen those photos, I will try adjustable. It's 4 rods. I will try adjustable zig rigs on 2 from the get go. I think like 2 straight out in that middle zone, and then 2 round the edges where it gets slightly shallower. But I guess everyone's doing the same thing. You know, it's hard. It's very hard to be doing something that much different. You know, like adjustable zigs 10, 20 years ago would have been quite revolutionary. But nowadays, you know, I know people are using them there. I know they work well. And once zigs, yeah, they will continue to work, but once they've been battered, they do lose their edge because they're not getting fed round them. You know, it's just
although you're at that time of year now where maybe
should be going deeper.
Yeah, well, that, and also maybe people haven't been using them too much. So
I'm in the WhatsApp group. They've been getting
have they?
They've been getting caught on zigs. Yeah.
Mate, to be fair, I think that when you go see the lake, like you are going to be using them on there. So yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but after that trip, I've got 2 weeks on that the Manor Carp fishery where that big fully scaled is, and at the touch wood, last time when I went there, it got caught twice 2 weeks before I went there, like literally just before. Oh, wow. And we're inside 3 weeks to my trip now, and it hasn't been caught since August. So it's obviously.
What weight was it out in August?
59.14.
Right, so it should be 60.
Should be there.
But it's a nice, it's a good looking
whether it's
fish,
58, 59. I don't really. No. I'd like to catch it.
Yeah. Should we start off with Mick the Greek?
Yeah,
he's first on here.
Hi, Mick.
Yeah, get a question in if you've got any questions. So I've recently seen you say you sharpen the hook on the inside of the hook instead of outside. Any tips on how to do that, please? And what advantages does it have instead of the normal way of sharpening?
Right, okay. So, I used to always sharpen my hooks like the Kamakuras are, so front planed. I used to always plane the front edge, make it a little bit like a cutting point, and used it for years like that. But over time, I know you can put like coatings on the hooks to keep the rust off. You know, you can put the Camacoat on. I know there's that other stuff that Elliot does. I can't think what it's called off the top of my head, but you can put these stuff on that stop the rust. But for me, I think that the coating, the non-slip coating, is the best stuff. You know, you're sharpening the hook to make the point finer, but in an ideal world, you'd keep as much of that non-slip coating on there as possible. And I've also noticed when I'm fishing for younger carp that have got softer mouths, I've noticed that you get more hook pulls when you've got those really front planed sharpened hooks. And also when you fish lakes, we've got a soft bottom. If fish lakes have got a soft bottom, when the carp in that lake have whether they're old or young, they can have softer mouths. You tend to get more hook pulls on those types of venues for those type of fish with front planed sharpened hooks. Now ultimately, you're only trying to make the very, very, very tip of the hook sharper. Like, I don't believe that you need to make it thinner further down the point. I think it's all about the very, very end. And I've literally been playing around with just jag sharpening stone, the green one preferably, laying the hook. I think it's better like that. I will do a Pecker's Tekkers on that soon. Because it's hard. I don't want to do Pecker's Tekkers on stuff that I haven't tried and tested, and I've been fishing like this for quite some time now. I'd say probably a couple of years. So I think it's about time that I showed it. It's nothing super revolutionary, but I do feel that it's the better way to do it now.
Cool. We've got one from Beer, Boobs and Techno. I've said that before.
Yeah, we said that before. Yeah, he's a regular.
I'm forever trying to reduce the weight of my tackle bag and barrow. Have you got any tips on weight reduction so I can sneak an extra bottle or two of left? He likes the strong stuff.
The real key is when you fish the same lake frequently, you start to get an idea of how you'll fish it. You know, one of the biggest problems for going from one lake to the next lake and not going frequently is you constantly add stuff to your bag thinking, oh, I might need this and I might need that and I might need this. But once you get tuned into a lake and you know what rigs you're going to be using, you know what baits you're going to be using, you can start to take stuff out of your bag that you won't need. And another thing you can do is have what I call a just-in-case box, like a just-in-case box that you keep in the car, like a clip-top big box, where you can have all like the extra bits of PVA, extra different size LEDs, marker floats, SPOMs, all of that sort of stuff, and keep that in the car and really refine down what you actually take, because a lot of the time you're carrying so much stuff that never sees the light of day. So yeah, my advice would be to get yourself a just-in-case box, really refine your kit down to what you know you're definitely going to need, and it's worst case scenario is a trip back to the car to get something that you might need, and then you know you need it. So yeah, it's so, like I say, it's so easy to end up taking stuff because you think you might need it, lugging it all the way around the lake, and it never sees the light of day.
Cool. Liam Banks, evening lads, hope you're well. Darrell, what things have you taken from the recent Quarter Underwater that you're putting into your own fishing?
Okay, so you might have seen some stuff on social media about me having a little play around with my multi-combi rig. So when I had my chance in front of the underwater camera, I immediately shortened my boom. I don't know why, trying to make my rig react a bit quicker. And then having watched Tom Stokes and Danny's one, I started to incorporate anti-tangle sleeves onto my combi multi-rig. So my standard rig that I've always used is on a hybrid leg clip with a ring swivel, crimped directly to that, so it's got a hinge, and then the boom is 5 inches long and the braided section is 3.5 centimetres long. Now, I started using a shorter boom, and I also started using an anti-tangle sleeve, and that was onto a quick change leg clip rather than the ring swivel, so it's always pushed away from the main line, and there's no chance of the hook bait coming back up under the main line. But I went to Gigantica recently, and I suffered a few more hook pulls than I normally do. And when I say a few more, I mean more than I was comfortable with. Like one night I had 9 bites and lost 3. And I like to think that 9 out of 10 is a good hook to land ratio. That's like the minimum what I'm hoping for in sort of open water conditions. And ideally better than that I'd like. But yeah, to lose 1 in 3, that's really, really bad. And I can't tell you if that's because I shortened my booms. I can't tell you if that's because I added the anti-tangle sleeve, or because I was fishing over an extremely tight bed of small particles and perhaps they're feeding a little bit differently, and I'm using plastic hook baits which they could be sucking in sort of by accident rather than really going for them and inhaling them in. So yeah, there's a few things at play that I changed, and it's hard to know which one of them potentially caused the run of hook pulls that I had. So I'm going to have to go back to how I normally fish it, how I have done, been successful, and start to add in these changes one at a time. But I'm really uncomfortable changing stuff when I'm fishing for big fish because, you know, like I lost 3 fish in a night at Gigantica. One of them could have been a 60, 70, 80 pounder, who knows what it was. Could have been another 20 pounder, but, you know, I don't want to be losing fish, and I think I'm going to go back to how I normally fish it until I'm fishing for small ones again at, say, like Blasford or something, when I go there in the winter for a few bites. I think I need to sort of, stick to what I know before I start testing again.
Cool. Daniel Hockaday has said, "Hi Darrell, did you ever get any comeback on Lac Dorian? Any plans on filming Lac de Deux?"
No, but when you say any comeback, what happens when you get caught breaking a rule there? The police come, they write you a ticket, but the ticket is basically just basically it has your membership number and your passport number on it to prove that they've given you a ticket. There'll be the club that own the fishing there will have a meeting at the end of the year, and then they decide what fines and what action they're going to take against for each person. So I won't know what's going to happen, but if they treat me as they treat everyone else, then I'm expecting a €400 fine plus a 2-year ban. That's sort of what's been happening to other people. So yeah, I won't find out until around Christmas time. But yeah, at the moment I can still fish there if I wanted to.
Be a nice Christmas present.
Yeah, at Christmas I'll get a nice little. Apparently it's one of those when you get, it's one of those letters that you have to sign for.
right.
to make sure that you
got it.
You received it, because
For it.
someone I know didn't sign for it on purpose. And basically when it came back and it basically said that if you you'd be arrested on your next entrance into France if you didn't. So he had to deal with it.
Yeah,
as you do.
I mean,
But yeah, that's when you break the rules, you've got to be prepared to accept what comes your way.
Yeah. Kyle Wallace, will you ever do another Big Carp Buzz? I've watched the Bluebell video well over 15 times.
The Big Carp Buzz. Oh, the Corda series, the Big Carp Buzz.
A while ago.
Well, the film, when I fished with that big fully scaled in last autumn, I fished there for a 3-week session, and it was originally filmed as a Big Carp Buzz film for Corda's YouTube, but now they've got this sort of sub-brand mindset, so they're talking about it might be a mindset film. So yeah, it's filmed in a similar sort of line, and that's due out in October.
Cool. Dan Tortellano. Apologies if I got that wrong. Darrell, any plans to re-release My Misspent Youth?
No. Unfortunately not. It's just maybe further down the line, but I just don't think there's enough of a market out there for it at the moment. I think if I was to reprint it, it wouldn't fly out the door. I've only just reprinted it a couple of years ago, so maybe at some point I've still got it on a hard drive. But yeah, it's not something I plan to do anytime soon.
Kyle actually wanted to know as well, will you ever make a return to Bluebell?
Maybe one day. There's some fantastic fish on that complex. I've never even looked at the San Martin Lake. I keep seeing these fish pop up on social media and thinking, they look. You should go there more often, really.
Popular place.
I
think Ash.
Yeah,
he went there.
Yeah.
And I'd won.
On Mallard.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
He said he struggled to get a swim, though.
Yeah, it's always really busy, It's one of the top days to get waters in that area.
Stuart Sturton. Darrell, the Super Spod reels, is there any spare spools available? It's a very good question, actually, because you don't normally get spare spools for Spod reels.
No. Well, I got some because I asked for them
right.
when I ordered them. But someone's since told me they're 50 quid each, the spare spools.
Whoa.
Well, the basic spool's like 80 odd quid normally, isn't it? But when you think the real retails at 150 quid, for the spool to cost 50 is quite spicy.
Yeah, you think it'd be like 25 or something.
Yeah. But what I'm going to say here, basically those reels are all made on, they've all got the same frame and shape. So you've got the emblem reels, the Super Spod. It's the emblem 45. And I reckon if you look through their range, there'll be spools that fit that reel that are from a different reel that might be cheaper, because they've got, is it crosscast as well?
Yeah, crosscast.
Crosscast is the budget reel in that range. If they do a crosscast 45, then that spool will probably fit that reel, and I bet it'd be cheaper.
It's you'd have to go to a shop that have them so you can
to check. Yeah, but I think they do, because I think they're you have the emblem 45, the crosscast 45, the Super Spod 45, and I think that's the framing of that reel. I reckon that there's potential to get spare spools for less than 50 quid.
Yeah. So there are spare spools, but not directly.
They don't come in. They don't come in the box.
No,
but you can order them.
Oh, you can. So you could order. Yeah,
they're 50 quid each.
So yes, there are.
Yeah, there are
if you want to spend 50 quid.
But it just seems quite a lot on a 150 quid reel.
Yeah. You're almost better off just buying another reel in case you need one.
But I thought, obviously, I looked at those reels and I'm thinking, I've got Bayesias. But a Spod reel, by definition, is more hard wearing. It's designed to be slightly heavier, but more sort of hard wearing. And I think at that money, with that quick retrieve, that is an absolute bargain at that price point. That's what I think.
Yeah. Cool. Here we go. He's back. Beer, boobs, and techno. We're not going to do that one, but we'll do the other one that he's got on here.
What, is it a bit too spicy?
I'm forever trying to reduce the weight of oh no, not that one. We've done that one. It's this one. What are your thoughts on the German rig? Is it a gimmick, or would you rather sip on a few Dunkel beers and use a Ronnie or a basic soft-coated rig for your solid bag work? I mean, yeah.
I guess I can't actually picture a German rig, but I can. Basically, a German rig is basically a knotless knot with the hair cut off, with the hook, the bait mounted on a ring swivel or a ring, and then you've got a bead on the hook. So it's like a hairless rig, isn't it? Without it's no D, hooks moving on the shank. There's nothing wrong with that rig. I like simple rigs, and that is a simple rig, but I haven't used it. You could use it in a solid bag if it tickles your boat, but it's not going to be. It's not revolutionary. It's not going to do anything that any other rig isn't already doing.
No. Tom, what makes you decide to do something different to the norm on a lake, either bait or spots?
Basically, when I go to a lake, initially, like when I don't know the lake, all I'm trying to do is find fish and find a spot that I think they're likely to touch down on. So a spot that's in the right depth, close to where the fish are. That's the first two things I'm trying to align. Where are the fish? And where's the nearest spot that I think those fish might touch, right? That's the first thing I'm thinking. Now, after that, it's trying to notice what other people aren't doing. It's like spots that are getting ignored, baits that are getting ignored, and patterns in what the fish are doing. If you start to see that they might sunbathe in a certain area, everyone fishes there, and then they move off somewhere else in the night to feed. Things like that I'm looking for. But that comes with experience of being there. You have to fish lakes, have to absorb the information, the data of what the fish are telling you, what you're seeing, and put the pieces of the puzzle together like that. But like initially, the simplest and most straightforward thing is find the fish, look for the obvious spot that's close to where those fish are, where you think they're most likely to touch down. Use rigs that you're confident in and baits that you think they will eat, So there's no real rocket science. It's just looking, seeing and putting it together.
Cool. Callum Williams, evening all, off to Gigantica next week on the Road Lake. Buzzing. Do you have any tips regarding bait, rigs, and inform pegs this time of year? Could you also explain the new boat drops? Thanks, mate. Are they on the Road Lake as well?
I don't know. I think so. I'm not sure. But right, so Road Lake can be quite peggy. I don't know the pegs by name, but I know basically what it is. The lake's like two rectangles. Now, two squares that are connected on a corner almost, and the fish tend quite a lot of the time to be in one end or the other end. I think a lot of the time they're in the far end, near swims called Decoy and that. I think there's like a bit of a bund where they've like gravelled off an old part of the lake, a bay, and they're quite often in that area. So that's one of the areas they really like to get. Another area they like to get is like the turtles. You've got no fishing bank up the left side of turtles, and that sort of Tea Party 1, Tea Party 2 area. That's another area they like to hold up. But you'd have to speak to the bailiffs to know what's been happening in recent weeks. That's like, I haven't fished it for years and years. I've not even been over there for years and years. So you'd be much better speaking to them. But what I do know, if they are doing the bait drops for you, you basically get your bait ready once per day. They come to you in the boat in the afternoon. They take your bucket of bait and they pour it on your mark float as you want it. If you want a widespread, they do your widespread. If you want it poured nice and tight, they do it nice and tight. But if you're fishing over lots of bait, I think it's an edge. Let's say you want to put out more than 10 kilo. I think it's worth having a bait drop, worth them doing it. If you're putting out 5 kilos or less, it's probably better off you putting it out. And if you're fishing one of the swims where you can bait up from the far bank, much easier to bait up from the far bank than have them come in your swim and disturb it with a boat. If it's a sort of catapult range, you might want to catapult it out rather than have a boat drop. So I think it's very swim dependent, whether you need it or not. And bear in mind how cold it's suddenly been recently. I'm not sure you're going to be filling it in. I'm not sure. I reckon you might want to be slightly more cautious with the amount of bait. So I'm not sure how much of an edge it'll be on Road Lake. Really, it's when you're fishing Gigantica in a central peg at long range, definitely an edge. But you might scare the fish out your swim constantly having the boat coming in and out of it on road lake. You might be a bit more, I don't know, a bit more subtle and discreet might be a better way to fish it. So, yeah, I would ask the bailiffs for their advice on that.
Cool. David Lloyd, Darrell, do call to make a 3-rod hold all for the Kaizen 12-foot 6s, as I'm struggling to find a rod bag for them using a 13-foot one, but would really like a 12-foot 6 one.
Well, they tell me, or I've heard via social media, that the 12-foot 6s fit in the 12-foot bag.
Oh. How do you calculate that one?
Well, because there's enough room. Apparently, there's just enough room in the 12-footer. Because bear in mind, it's only 3 inches on each section. Yeah. So if there's 3 inches of room extra, then it does. Yeah, that's. I've heard them saying that to people. I've heard Dan saying that at the Carp show to people, that you won't need to buy yourself a new rod bag if you're going from 12s to 12 6s, because they will fit inside the 12-foot bags.
Yeah, coming on that podcast just to find that out is worth it, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you've got a 13-foot bag, obviously it's going to fit in there as well. But if I'm guessing you're finding it a bit too sloppy. That's why you're asking. Yeah. A bit too floppy at the end. So yeah, you might be better off putting it in a 12-foot bag.
Yeah. Cool. Patrick Goodwin, Road Lake May sold on site. I don't know if that's in reply to something else. Mick the Greek, what's your thoughts on the Kaizen greens while we're on the topic of Kaizens? Kaizen greens.
I think for 99% of anglers, they're absolutely ideal. You know, how far do you want to take things? As in, ultimately, it depends how much disposable income you've got to throw at something. Obviously, the Platinums are a better product. They will cast further, like for like. They are fractionally lighter. They do perhaps look a tiny bit better. But if you're saying one costs 500 quid and one costs 150 quid, you're getting 3 for the price of one. Now, let's say you were going to buy a £3.5 Platinum. Perhaps you buy a £4 green, because you're getting that slightly less crisp carbon with the greens than what you'd get with the Platinums. So yeah, I would think for 99% of people, the greens are probably the best option. And if you're like on the edge of which test curve to go for, I would just advise you go slightly heavier. So if you were looking at the 3.5s, I would go for the 4s in the green. I actually prefer the Kaizen green Spod rod to the Platinum one. It's got slightly different action. And although one's £500 and one's £150, I actually prefer the cheaper one for spodding. I do prefer the Platinums, like the fishing rods. Like, I think they are noticeably crisper in the carbon, but the greens for that price point, you know, then ultimately they're not going to catch you any more fish. Having nicer rods is not going to catch you any more fish. And if you're going to buy 13-foot 4-pounders, you're going to be able to cast as far as you need to cast. So yeah, for the money, I don't think you can go wrong with the greens. They look the part, and yeah, I think they're great value for money.
Cool. Daniel Todd, at this time of year, when the night temperatures are dropping, how important is depth? Are you looking for slightly deeper areas to present your rigs?
I always think of, once you get to September, I think the fish start to feed deeper than they have for the whole year. I think like they're going to be progressively touched. You still catch them shallow in certain conditions and whatnot, but I definitely find fish, depends on the lake and what sort of holding areas they get, but on big open lakes, you just notice fish, they stop moving around the pond as much or as quickly, and they quite often like centralise at range in big open venues, and especially sort of searching out the deeper water. So yeah, I'd be looking to locate fish in the dark, because they're quite often a lot of venues, bite times and activity start to move towards the night at this time of year, you know, September, October, November. But you can just notice that everything's happening in the dark, and also progressively deeper. You know, you could be fishing, let's say you're fishing a lake that's like 30 foot in the middle. The fish might not have, no fish have been caught in 30 foot all summer long. And then suddenly, once you're into like the back half of September, getting into October, suddenly those shows that you've been seeing over deep water, they're now important. Before, they were just moving fish that are moving through high in the levels. At this time of year, I really think that they're going deeper, and you're going to be getting takes out of 30 foot on lakes that, say you've got a lake that's got 30, 40 and 50 foot. Those parts of the lake might be devoid of fish on the bottom throughout the warmer months, but now the fish will be going down there. They'll be deep, and you can catch them there for sure.
Perfect. Right, Simon Mortimer. Hi, Darrell. I'm booked on Island Swim Clover Lake next October, doubling up with a mate. It's tough to picture the area from the map. How would you approach the week in regards to fishing as a team? How many rods, not cutting each other off? Keep up the good work, Simon.
Well, I've only fished it in the summer and in the spring. And in the spring, when there's no weed in it, when it's completely desolate, the fish are really looking for cover under the trees on the far bank and stuff. If you're going in the autumn, I think there's a good chance there's still going to be a bit of weed about. And when there's a bit of weed about out in the lake, they're more likely to be in open water. But yeah, I don't know that. I don't know how it's going to... I don't know how the weed will be this summer before you get there, etc. But yeah, I would... If you're doubling up, you might want to fish 2 rods each. You could fish 3 each, depending on what the situation is you're faced with when you get there. You know, so you've got to read it when you get there. You don't want to be cramming too many lines and making it too busy out there. If you've got a couple of perfect spots and that's where the fish are, then just fish a couple of perfect spots, like 2 each. You know, but yeah, it's really hard for me to give you I don't know what it's going to be like when you get there in October. I've not been there at that time of year, and I don't know if it's going to be weedy, but it's a pretty straightforward lake in that it's small. You're going to be able to see all of your water. You can use a boat. If the water's clear, you'll be able to see the bottom because it's not very deep. And if it's not clear, you're going to be looking for either clear spots in the weed or fishing tight to the far margin. That's pretty much all I can tell you, really.
Cool. David Lloyd is 70 nights into a blank on a 62-acre sand quarry. So he's off to Burners in 2 weeks for hopefully some confidence and a bend in the rod. What months would you completely swerve the 62-acre low stock lake, maybe 20 carp?
Oh, basically, if you're fishing a really big lake that's really low stock, you got to fish there at prime time. And when I say prime time, you know, May. You know, the last week of April, the first 2 weeks of May, they are notoriously some of the best weeks of the year. Those 3 weeks, the last week of May, last week of April, first 2 weeks of May, they're like routinely when we do the biggest shoots for caller. And the reason they're routinely the weeks that we do the biggest shoots for caller because they are the most productive month, or the best chance of catching a big one. You know, a lot of times at that time of year, the weed hasn't had a chance to come up. The water warms up quickly. The fish get on the move and get on the feed before the natural food has really had a chance to jump up. And at that time, if there's no weed about, no natural food, you see a couple of shows, you fling out a bright pop-up in the vicinity of some activity, quite often it can be as easy as that to catch one of these really rarely caught jewels that live in these low stock pits. But after that spring period, once you get that sort of spring pre-spawning, those couple of weeks out the window, once the fish have spawned, then the weed will come up on these sort of lakes. And then the fish will sort of search out the weedier areas, the cover, you know, the sort of normal sort of things that they like to hang around. And then it's a case of sort of noticing where the fish are hanging out, picking some spots in that area, baiting them, and having sort of spots in different parts of the lake depending on conditions. You'll notice on big lakes the fish can be quite nomadic and get around the lake quite a lot. And if that is the case, then you need to know which parts of the lake they're using most, and maybe prepping spots, certainly logging spots that you can for casting to when you find the fish in these areas. But yeah, ultimately it's going to be all about location and all about timing, and having time off to do longer sessions during the best times is one of the best things you can do to lean things in your favour.
Cool. Neil Graves. Hi, Darrell and Scott. Do you think the new rule change at Gigantica will change the dynamic on the lake? Any coincidence the Immaculate came out in the week after it's introduced? Thanks, Neil.
I don't even remember if Warren was having the bait drop or not.
What swim was he in?
He was in Big Southerly, the one that I was in the week before.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the coincidences that it came out that very week the year before.
Yes, yeah, I remember you saying.
So that's a lot of times these really big, rarely caught fish, especially female ones. They tend to get caught after spawning when they're trying to replenish a bit of weight after like going through that. So that's one thing to take in mind. But I'm not sure that, in answer to your question, I'm not sure if I can't remember if Warren was having those bait drops or not. I think he might have done, but yeah, I'm not sure how much that would have influenced the capture. I think it's so hard to say with a fish like that. It's so rarely caught. It wasn't like he was fishing extreme range and touching areas that haven't been touched before. Yeah, it's hard to say if it was an influence on the capture. But what I can tell you is that obviously I've been carp fishing for 30 years. And to hear the shout immaculate, you know, it's one thing. Go round and you look at it in the landing net, and it was incredibly long. That's in my mind, you know, before I got there, I was picturing it being as wide as a horse, like thinking it's just going to be so wide. And although it was really wide, in relation to how long and deep it wasn't shockingly wide in any way. It was actually surprisingly narrow, but it was how long it was and how deep it was.
How long was it? Like longer than the table?
As long as the table.
As long.
Yeah, like.
And then as like deep, like that kind of size.
Probably not quite as deep as the table, but it probably was as long as the table. I would say
big,
4.5 foot. Maybe like it's got to be 4. It's definitely 4 foot. Maybe getting on for 4.5 foot. Like, do you know when it's in the landing net? His head was like buried in it, buried in the corner one end, and his tail was buried in the other end of it.
You going to sling all right?
Yeah, he's got his own mat and its own sling. Because obviously they're waiting for it to be £100,
so
and it is £100. You know.
Yeah, like, well, yeah.
Because I'm pretty certain, looking at that fish, it's a female. I can't say for 100% sure. I'm not sitting there expecting it's vent or anything, but it looks like a female to me. I wouldn't say it was absolutely empty because it wasn't like hollow or anything, but it wasn't pumped. It was. Do you know when you see them in the winter when they're up? It wasn't like that at all. It was just big, and it's called the Immaculate. The thing that shocked me the most is how young it looked and how fresh.
It's good though,
because it's been. I remember seeing pictures of it at 47 on the wall in Gigantica from 2007. Sean Harrison holding it. So if you think, so that's almost 20 years ago. 2007, almost. It's 17 years ago, and it was a good 40 then, but it looked fresh. And he reckoned Warren, who caught it, he said it pulled. He said it was like he could tell it was a big. I'm not saying it like towed him all around the lake or anything, but he was like, I knew it was a big one. No, I knew it was a big one.
He's towing £100 fish around like
£98. The biggest carp. Like it was an honour just to see it, to see it in the flesh. One day I'd like to catch it, but it's so, like I say, so rarely caught. If you think that every swim around that lake is taken every week of the year, there's minimum of 8 guys. In the winter, there's 8 guys on it. In the summer, there's 13 guys. All of them, all those swims are taken. 3 rods out of it every year.
That's the thing. You'd think, like rule of averages, it would get caught more.
That's why it's so special when it gets caught. It's not just big. You know, if it was say it was like 4 or 5 times a season fish, I would be focusing my time to try and catch that, because if it's a 4 to 5 times a season fish, you just got to keep catching, and sooner or later, odds are you're gonna. If you catch loads, you're gonna catch it. Whereas I think you could spend your whole life's money, like everything you've ever earned,
Yeah.
trying to catch it and never catch it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very hard fish to catch, and well done to Warren, because that is a fish of a lifetime for sure.
It is, yeah, definitely. Rupert Torp. Hi lads, the last couple of nights we've had a drop in temperature. Oh, we've done that, have we? Drop is where would you? Oh no, it's different question.
Okay.
Hi lads, the last couple of nights we've had a drop in temperatures. With the baiting, do you think scaling back on the bait as the temperatures drop is the way to go, or would you increase the volume for a period?
I think you should really, like, a lot of time it's baiting's to do with how much you think the fish are eating. And I do think suddenly when you get a sudden drop in temperature like this, that can cause them to turn off a little bit. Obviously, every venue's different. If you're fishing somewhere that's rock hard, then you're going to be going on the side of caution. You're fishing somewhere that's full of fish, you might be filling it in. So it's a very open-ended question. It does depend on so many different things. But I'll just give you my thoughts on what's going on. For the last few years, we've had very, I would say, slow starting springs and long ending autumns that have gone into like winters that barely really happen. Now this has been it was a slow starting spring. We've not had much of a summer. Really, it's not been overly hot for a summer. A lot of venues have had trouble with fish not really spawning. And when weights of fish tend to be high, which often coincides with fish not spawning, they tend to be eating less. And if it's the temperature's dropping, I would definitely. Basically, I think autumn's going to be coming early. If you've had frost in September, normally we might get a frost in October if we're unlucky. Quite often the frosts don't come until November. So I'll definitely be conscious about how much bait I'm putting out if this cold weather continues, especially on the more difficult lakes.
Totally off topic, but I see like skiing snow reports.
Yeah.
And normally you get snow from, maybe late October, but normally like early November is when the ski resorts see, like most of them. They got it yesterday. That's like one of the earliest times they've had it for a long time. Yeah. And if they're getting that early, I'm not thinking something can change. Just because you've had an early frost, it doesn't mean that the whole autumn's going to be freezing. No. Like in 2 weeks' time, it's 20 degrees.
It could be like 25 degrees again because it can happen.
It is in a few days. It's going to be 20 degrees.
Is it? Yeah. So don't let this single degrees. Frost.
No.
Necessarily. Whoa. I would just say if it is cold, you've got to think. Generally, as the water cools, the fish will be eating less. And as the water warms, they'll be eating more. So rising water temperature for carp, in the summer, sometimes when it cools off is good. But a lot of the time, in the autumn, when it's warming up, in the winter when it's warming up, that's the better weather to be fishing on.
Do you think if you're regularly going to a lake, say if we're regularly going to Grenville, for argument's sake, we go every week. I know you can't, but if you were going every week, would it be an advantage to go off reading the water temperature, having a gauge and taking it with you like every time you go, and if it drops down a couple of degrees, I think
if you're fishing somewhere regularly, you should be able to read it from what's happening rather than like temperature. Temperature, you're going to take temperature into account, but really you're looking at what's happening, as in like activity levels. Are they going up or are they going down? Bite levels, are people catching over more bait, less bait? You're reading those things rather than the exact temperature of the water. But having fished Bayswater a lot of winters, I've always fished Bayswater autumn, winter, spring rather than summertime. And I know with that lake, when the winter comes, everyone drops off, and that's good. Fish get relaxed, they're not under pressure. But I also know that as soon as you get a big wind, because it's an open lake, Bayswater, if you get a big wind with mild temperatures, those carp start to stir. And when I mean stir, they start to move around looking for food. And I imagine somewhere like Grenville, you could have it could be freezing cold, but because it's so open to the wind, you have a massive storm coming, that water temperature can go up by 5 degrees, and that could be there've been some huge hauls there in the winter.
Yeah,
like huge
in the
hauls.
shallow areas as well.
Yeah, Yeah, I think a lot of times when lakes have been cold, once they've been cold, you're looking for the shallower parts of the lake rather than 30, 40 foot.
Sam Perry, recently been proven lead clips are much more effective than a heli, but unless it's a rock hard spot and paranoid, it will be sitting funny. How often does it have to be before you swap to a heli? So when do you swap to a heli from a...
I think a good rule of thumb, if you cast a marker float out without a tail, and when I say without a tail, I mean if you thread your line, your braid through your marker lead, and then tie it directly, you have a bead, and then you tie it to your marker float. If you can cast that out and it pops every single time on the spot, then I would suggest that you don't need a helicopter rig. I think helicopter rigs are good when you've got patchy weed and you can't be certain of where you're landing. You've got soft bottom, got a chance of lead digging in, but helicopter rigs are like, they're almost for when you're uncertain. You know, if you know how firm your lake bed is, like you said, a lead clip is definitely more effective, more instant hooking, better presentation on harder spots. But a helicopter rig gets you round when you don't know exactly what you're fishing over, or if it is soft. So yeah, it's, if you can get a marker float to pop up, I'd suggest you'd probably get away with a lead clip, and if you can't, then you're probably better off a helicopter.
Cool. Dan, been using the multi-combi rig, but struggling to thread the braided section through a size 6 wide gape. Any tips?
Have you got fingers like sausages? If depends what braid you're using. Like, I'm gonna guess here that you're not using the called a slip D braid, and you're probably using something else that you had in your box. And when I've tried to do it with Supernatural, it's really hard to get through the eye. It just doesn't want to go through there. You need like quite a stiff braid, because then it will just go through the eye quite easily.
Nice, easy. Carl Pratley, currently on the bank, having a rough session on par fishery in Brentwood. Had a couple, but also had big cats. Do you think a lake with big cats affects carp feeding confidently on a spot?
How big are the cats? That's the question, you know, because cats are pretty aggressive, and if they're much bigger than the carp, then they will not say eat them, but they'll definitely have a go at them, and chase them off the spot and stuff. So yeah, I would, when I'm fishing lakes I've got catfish, I try not to catch the catfish, as in I'll use baits that aren't really prone to catch, you know, tiger nuts, hemp, sweet corn, you know, as opposed to pellets and fish meal boilies. I've not fished loads of lakes with cats, and I've certainly not seen enough footage of carp and cats feeding together, so I try not to catch them rather than create a situation where you got them both feeding together. So yeah, I don't think it's a good thing ever. If they're big catfish, you know, like 50 pounders odd, if you got like a 50, 60, 70 pound catfish in the area and you've got 20 pound carp, then that catfish will be a threat to the carp and causing the carp to feel uncomfortable, for sure.
Cool. Tommy Chase, staying on the Gigantica theme, do you know why they closed the main lake this week?
Yeah, they had a couple of fish die. I've had a specialist there to check them, and you know, when the water's really hot like that, that's when they're at their most fragile. Because I've had a couple of fish die, they're just protecting the fish. You know, they've got some really old, really big fish in there, and just to make sure that the fish that had died had been ones that had been caught, so like that extra stress of them being caught had been what has sort of pushed them over the edge. So they've just closed the lake for a couple of weeks to give the fish like a relaxing environment, so they're not under pressure from fishing, reduce the chance of them being caught and dying. But it's under control. It's not like a massive fish kill or anything. They just lost a couple of fish and they're just protecting what they've got.
Cool. Brad has asked, what sinking braid would you use for distance casting?
That's quite a good question, actually, because a lot of people won't know the answer to this. Basically, most sinking braids are really poor for casting, because they've got the heavy element weaved into the braid. That's makes the braid thicker thicker braid, heavier braid doesn't cast well, and quite often they're quite coarse, and especially like that called a sub braid, brilliant abrasion resistant braid, really fast sinking, but it is quite coarse and it is quite thick and it is quite heavy and it doesn't cast that far. The only one that I know that does sink and is quite smooth, I think is it one of the Fox ones. It's either called Horizon or Submerge or something. They do one that's quite smooth. It's like brown and white. They do it in 20. They used to do it in 25 and 40, and it's not like a fast sinking braid. It's basically, it doesn't have to be a fast sinking braid. It just has to stay once you put it through the film of the water. As long as it doesn't pop back up, that's what braid that floats will cast really far, but you'll get dragged off your spot by debris building up in your line. But I'm pretty sure this Fox one, it might be called Submerge, can't remember, but it's a very smooth, soft braid, not very coarse. It's not fast sinking, but it is sinking, and that's the one that's probably best. If you need sinking braid to cast far, that's probably the best one.
Cool. Sam also asked a very similar question. He said, what braid do you use at Rockford, or what braid would you recommend for fishing long range?
When I fished at Rockford, I used everything because I was constantly evolving and trying to get further and further and further. For pure distance, you're not going to get much better than 20-pound whiplash. Very, very, very fine. You put 50-pound leader on it, it goes absolutely miles, but it does float, so you need to backlead it tight, fish it like an absolute bowstring. I was fishing that. I caught a fish at 46 wraps fishing that 20-pound whiplash. But they used to do this other stuff called nanofil, which was a fused braid. So it's like a single filament, single filament braid. It's more like a 2-pound mono. But again, I was using that in, I think it was 25 pounds, but it was 0.17 mil, and it used to absolutely, it used to, like, you tie your leader knot, and when you let go, you could hear this like. And it was like the leader knot like smacking into the rings as it went out, and you had to retie the leader knot after like a 3-night session. You whizzed it out there a few times. You could see that there'd be fraying around the knot where it's like obviously flapping through the rings. But for Rockford, I think you won't go far wrong with 20-pound whiplash with a heavy leader on there. I can't think of much that's going to cast better than that.
Cool. Kyle Wallace, I'm looking at getting a set of Beziers. I've seen you've had your fair share of them. What model would you say is your overall favourite?
The QDXs is the ones that I've had over the years. I've had lots of sets of them over the years. I think the black ones just look really nice. I prefer the size of the QDXs to the they've got the newer model, the 45 model. It's got a slightly longer reel stem on it, and because I'm used to the old QDXs, when I'm using the newer ones, when I'm trying to feather the line, I keep missing it because it's slightly further away. But yeah, you won't go wrong with any of the Bezier models. They're the top, the best of the best, nicest reels you can get.
Kieran Rashley has asked, evening guys, if you turned up on a busy day, ticket water and see fish, would you plumb for a spot or just cast to them? Thanks.
Depends what I thought was out there. Sometimes you know a little bit about how weedy it's likely to be out there, having spoken to people. Sometimes you can see how weedy it's likely to be by sort of the margins and what's sort of around you. But yeah, it's a question that I'll do different things in different situations. Sometimes the best course of action is just literally just plop a couple of rigs out towards the activity, keeping the disturbance down, whether that's solid bag or hinge stiff rig, whatever it is. Just plop it out to the activity, keep the disturbance down, and see if you can nick one quickly. And in that time, while you're waiting to see if you can nick one quickly, just keep an eye on where the fish are showing, and then usually I'll give it a couple of hours, something like that, whilst I'm building a picture of what's going on. Once I've seen where the fish are showing frequently, if those like single hook baits or bags haven't produced, then I'll lead around near to where I've seen the activity. have a good feel around out there before I sort of set my stall out. But when you cast out to the activity and you feel lead down, you should get a rough idea of how good your chances of a bite are. If you've cast out to a jumping fish and you just feel it go down into weed, chances are you might not catch anything. If it goes down with a decent-ish drop, then you know that you've got presentation. If you've got presentation and there's fish in the area, there's a good chance the fish might take the bait. So, a lot of times I go in easy, like just try and catch one quickly, build a picture of by what I'm seeing, and then interrogate those areas once I've done that. Yep.
Cool. Ivan has asked, what's your view on putting a shot on the front of the hook?
I understand the logic in it. Basically, the whole idea of the shot in the hook is to when the fish picks up the bait, the hook point drops. That's what the shot on the hook is trying to do for you. You're trying to make the hook point heavy and in the right position, because obviously the fish gets hooked when it tensions the rig. Some people have said in the past that fish get hooked when they spit the bait out, which I think is possible, but I don't think that's the main and most common way fish get hooked. They get hooked when they tension the rig, and if the hook point is hanging down because of the weight of a split shot, when the rig is tensioned, it's in the right place to catch hold in the fish's in the bottom of the fish's lip. Now, the negative of having a split shot on the hook is you make the hook heavier. You make it more difficult for the fish to draw it into its mouth in the first place. And I do think you'd have times when the fish comes for the bait, sucks at it lightly, it doesn't come, and then the fish doesn't end up taking it. So I think it makes the rig mechanically more sound, but I think it has some negatives as well. Everything that you do for one thing has another effect in another way. I've not used it enough myself to give, it's not something that I'm using every time I go, having seen Dan do it, but it is something that I'm looking at thinking, yeah, I might need to try this, but at the moment I'm not.
Liam McGoldrick is going to Free Eels at the end of November, and he's asked,
What swims him?
He hasn't said.
Okay.
But what would be your baiting approach?
Well, when we went in November, we fished Sell, didn't we? And we caught good. Sell is obviously a great boilie at any time of year, but I think it really comes into its own in the colder weather. I think a lot of the better baits out there from other companies at the moment are fish meal baits, and I think Sell is a great cold weather bait, and we done really well in November using that there. So I don't think you go far wrong with Sell. You know that some of it's gone in the lake in over the years because it's a popular bait. Fish have probably seen a bit of it. It's not over oily or fatty, and it just works everywhere. When you go in somewhere at a difficult time of year like that, the last thing that you want is to be questioning whether it's working. So that would be my other take. Sell, and then you don't have to think about it.
Nice. Roy Smith. Hi, Darrell and Scott. Did you already try and fish with the long shank beaks? What's your experience? Kind regards, Roy.
I only tried them recently. I went filming for CarpFix. Film will be out shortly. I went somewhere where I was hoping to get loads of bites and build up a bit of confidence in what is a new pattern of hook for me, but perhaps didn't pick the right venue. We went for 48 hours. I had 2 bites. I had one, I lost one, which isn't really enough data to say yay or nay. I really want to go to Blasford. Blasford's my sort of winter. I always feel confident at Blasford. I know it really well. There's nothing monstrous in there that's going to be life-changing if I lost it. I like the pattern. Mechanically, they turn very quickly. The beak point, I hope, will stay in really well. But I haven't used them enough to give you sort of my feelings on them at the moment.
Cool. Patrick Goodwin, French Public Dam River. You can use a boat to bait and drop rigs. Would you suggest pre-baiting a few days before, or bait and wait?
Pre-baiting, ultimately you'll know, depends how busy the lake is or the river system. If you don't think anyone's going to fish on your bait before you get there, then pre-baiting's brilliant. It works if no one fishes on your bait. So your bait needs to rest. It needs to be line free. And if where you're fishing, no one's going to fish over your bait when you're not there, then definitely pre-baiting. Your bait is working for you whilst you're not fishing. But what happens when you do start fishing over your bait? As soon as you start catching, that's takes it back to zero again. As in, like once you start catching, putting hooks in fish, spooking the fish, they're not building confidence. They're losing confidence in that area. So the longer you can bait it for, the more fish will arrive in that zone. And then when you do fish it, you need to make the most of it while you can, because once you start catching them and they start seeing their mates get caught, they start to lose confidence in the area. So yeah, but pre-baiting's great, best when no one fishes over it, but yeah, it's not the be all and end all. Location's more important than
that. Liam's in swim 6
in November.
Yeah,
I think that's a good shout, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah,
swim 6 always is a good bet.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see fish in 6 for sure. Yeah, I think 6 is a good shout. I'll obviously be fishing long range out towards the island, sort of on the left hand island. I wouldn't bother with that right hand island. The island that's in front of 5, I would be not worrying about that. I'd be fishing sort of the middle of the channel and left towards the big island.
Yeah. Right, 2 more questions. One's from Kyle. What is your job role at Corda?
Well, I'm not actually employed by Corda anymore. I'm basically just a sponsored angler. I haven't got a job title as such. I'm just a sponsored angler. I do 50 days a year for them filming, or shop days, or do the carp shows for them. But yeah, I'm basically a sponsored angler.
We'll finish with beer, boobs and techno.
Yeah.
Whilst in the pub, I like to mix my drinks for a better effect. Do you mix boily flavours? And if so, why? I mean,
well, have I used different boilies together at the same time?
Link or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I've done that. I remember at Free Islands when I was using the banoffee shelf ice with the cell, like mixing them up and then fishing banoffee hook baits. People used to say that having lots of different baits, you're catering for different palates. Fish that certain fish might like different flavours. I understand the logic of that. And when you're fishing a mixed bed of particles, you might have hemp, maize, and tigers. But for me, I'm most confident when I'm fishing 100% straight. So let's say I'm fishing sweet corn. I'm most confident when I'm fishing straight sweet corn with either double sweet corn over the top or a yellow pop-up over the top, nothing else. I'm most confident when I'm using maggots, when I'm just using maggots and I've got maggots on the hook. I think it looks so obvious when you've got loads of different things out there. Do you know what I mean? It's like
it does look nicer when you mix up 2 different colours of boilies.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, and when we fish Grenvilles, quite often, obviously, I'm using my mainline bait that I've got or sticky.
Yeah.
When I was using sticky, and his boilies, because his boilies are going in the lake, aren't they?
Yeah. Like with his bait, obviously you get a touch of maize. Not that it makes much difference, but it makes it's in there, and otherwise you can't put it in.
Yeah,
I like.
One thing I will say is, like, if you fish lakes where stuff goes in frequently, like say you fish a lake where the guys sell pellet on the lake, you'll find they really like that pellet. If you fish a lake where everyone uses cell, you'll find they really like cell on there. So if something's really going in somewhere, they can get tuned into it, and it's worth doing that. You can fight it and you'll catch what you catch, but if you go to Parco de Brenta, for example, and you don't fish their pellet, you are at a disadvantage, And I think when you go to Grenvilles, I think you should probably have some of Paul's bait because it's going in there. I think it's probably best. So, yeah, you can mix different flavours up. How much of an edge? It's here or there, really. I prefer to fish straight where I can, really.
Right, Ben's got one last question. Might as well do it on here. Have you ever fished Reeds? Is it Reedsmere or Reedsmere? He's put.
Is he talking Reedsmere or Redmire?
No, Reedsmere it will be.
No, it's up north. That I've not fished there.
I'm going to start in the new year.
historical venue. I don't know a lot about it. There's been lots of writing done on it over the years, but a long time ago. Yeah, I don't know anything about it really.
Cool. Well, thank you all for your questions. Over the next 2 weeks, we've got both of the Gigantica films. Part one is on next Friday, and then the following the 27th, and then we're into October already. So we will see you next month.
Thanks again. See you next time.